Welcome to the Alaska Gubernatorial Candidate Forum, presented by the Alaska Outdoor Council. For decades, the Alaska Outdoor Council has worked to protect Alaskans' hunting, fishing, trapping, and public access rights, and to promote responsible management of our lands and wildlife. And now, your host, Alaska Outdoor Council President, Rob Matthews.
To the Alaska Outdoor Council, Alaska Candidate Forum. On behalf of the Alaska Outdoor Council, I want to thank you for being here tonight. Whether you are in person or joining us from somewhere across this great state, we appreciate your commitment to the great state of Alaska. For more than 6 decades, the Alaska Outdoor Council has worked to protect, promote, and preserve access to our outdoor traditions: hunting, fishing, trapping, shooting sports, motorized and non-motorized recreation, and responsible resource development. Our membership represents communities from southeast to the North Slope, and we all share one common value: keeping Alaska accessible for Alaskans. We are honored to welcome an experienced and respected moderator this evening, Mike Pacaro from the Kenai. Mike has long been engaged in public affairs discussions across Alaska, and we appreciate him for moderating this forum.
See if you applaud after the show.
As you know, there's more than 17 individuals that are running this year's race for the governor. So what we had to do to narrow this down is we come up with a weighted mathematical equation to identify the candidates that you see before you. This weighted mathematical equation consisted of a survey to more than 3,300 members of the Alaska Outdoor Council, and that counted for 50% of the weight. 25% of the weight was for individual donors to the candidates. 12.5% was the total amount of fundraising, and 12.5% for the social media following. And these are the candidates that you see before you today: Mr. Click Bishop, Mr. Dave Bronson, Mr. Adam Crum, Mr. Matt Halela, Miss Shelley Hughes, and Miss Bernadette Wilson. Thank you for all being here tonight. The Alaska Outdoor Council is a nonpartisan organization. We do not exist to advance a political party. We exist to advance the policies that protect the outdoor opportunities of multiple users, science-based wildlife management, and a strong future for Alaska's resource economy. Our goal tonight is simply respectful dialogue, clear answers, and a focus on the issues that matter to the Alaska outdoor community. And with that, I will turn tonight over to Mike.
Thanks very much, Rob. I appreciate that. And welcome to everybody. Welcome to the Outdoor Council's Gubernatorial Candidate Forum. Our mission is to promote conservation, protect public access, and preserve Alaska's outdoor heritage. Tonight, you will hear directly from the candidates that wish to lead our state. Each candidate will have equal time. We ask candidates and our audience to remain respectful. I know you will. Personal attacks are not permitted, and I may interrupt if time limits need to be enforced, and my decision is final. Candidates are introduced in the alphabetical order and will rotate throughout the evening. The candidates, as you heard before: Click Bishop, Dave Bronson, Adam Crum, Matt Halela, Shelley Hughes, and Bernadette Wilson. And now for the opening statements. You will have 90 seconds. And when you hear this ding, go ahead, Allison. Okay, there you go. Watch out for her. She's good. That means you've got 10 seconds left. Okay? So here we go. You have 90 seconds. This is the opening statement. What is your vision for Alaska, and how will you protect our outdoor heritage, economy, and communities as governor? And we'll start with Click Bishop and go down the line.
Hello, Can all hear me? Very good. And in the back? Yep, all right, great. Hi, my name's Click Bishop, for those of you that don't know me. 68 years old, been in Alaska since I was 18 months old, and have lived and worked all over the state. And I've got a very good, comprehensive working overview of the state of Alaska. And with that being said, my trade is an operating engineer. I worked on taps right out of high school, and did that for 20 years, building civil projects all over Alaska. I was then pegged by Governor Palin to be the Commissioner of Labor and Workforce Development, and I came on board and worked for her administration, then on to the Parnell administration. Thought I was done when I retired, and some people convinced me, actually 6 sitting Republican senators, to run for an open Senate seat, and I did that. And people said, Click, what is a good qualification for a candidate? And I said, well, to really serve the people, you got to have a servant's heart, and lean into that. It's obviously not about the money. I don't think any of us are here for the money, right? At all. And it's about bringing the state forward and stemming the tide of out-migration. 13 years in a row is too much, and losing the wrong demographic. Thank you.
All right. Dave Bronson.
I got it. Well, thanks, Outdoor Council, for doing this. What a great venue, a great opportunity for all of us. My name is Dave Bronson. I grew up hunting, fishing in northern Wisconsin, white-tailed deer, rabbits, and fishing. And when I was a kid, I knew back then I wanted to live in this state, and I wanted to hunt and fish in this state. So I went off to college, got an economics degree, flew for the Air Force, mostly B-1s, then got an airline job, came up here, and when the airline offered me a crack at living in Alaska, I took it, and I've never looked back. That was 35 years ago. We've raised our 2 kids here. I spend most of my time, free time that is, with my family. The most important things to me are my family, my faith, and the great outdoors of Alaska. I know the most important thing to a lot of us here is access. I bought an airplane so I could have access, and as much as I love y'all, when I'm out hunting and fishing, I don't want to see any of you. And so my focus is access. And I got an airplane to do that, and that worked real well until a bear decided to eat the plane, and then we got that fixed. And I bought a small boat to go to Prince William Sound to go out and fish. And that worked until they started cutting back the limits on halibut and now rockfish limitations that are coming up. So again, my focus here tonight is giving you the access that I had growing up or in the last 35 years in this state.
All right, thank you. Next is Adam Crum.
Hello. Hello. My name is Adam Crum. Alaska is not just the place that I was born, it's who I am. I believe outdoor access isn't a privilege handed down by the government. It's a right held by the people and guaranteed by our Constitution. I hunt, fish, hike, I live the Alaskan dream with my family, not as a talking point, but as a way of life. I'm a business owner. I served as Alaska's Revenue Commissioner and Health Commissioner, and I watched federal agencies make decisions from 3,000 miles away, insulated from the consequences and not accountable to anybody who lives here. Article 8 of our Constitution could not be more clear. We are to manage our resources for the maximum benefit of Alaskans under the principles of common use, not for federal convenience. Today, 60% of our land is under federal control, 60%. Too many land managers treat Alaska like a museum, not like a living, working state. They close land, they choke off access, they actually override science, and now they're overtly stripping away Alaska's right to manage its own fishing game. That's not partnership, that's federal domination. Alaska's future depends on a hard line in the sand. Defend state management, demand science over politics, and push back every time there's federal overreach. I'm a lifetime member of the Alaska Outdoor Council because you've never been afraid to fight. And I'm here to fight for the next generation of Alaskans and defend the rights that came with statehood.
All right, thank you. And now Matt Halala. Is that the right way to say that?
Hello. It's Halala. Yes.
Halala.
Good. Halala. Yeah.
All right.
I'm not sensitive.
Well, no, I'm going to make sure I say it right.
It's Finnish. Yeah. Anyway, thank you for being here. It's an honor, the Alaska Outdoor Council. I'm an Alaskan born and raised. I was raised on the Kenai Peninsula in Soldotna. I met my future wife in junior high, married my high school sweetheart in 1990. We were 88 graduates of Soldotna. And every question can be answered is what's in the best interest of the next generation. And being raised on the peninsula, there was a balance between development and job opportunities for the young and conservation-minded recreation and sustainable harvest. And from the Kenai Peninsula in Soldotna, I was able to fish on the Kenai River, hunt moose, rabbit, what have you, ducks, right there within a few miles of my home. And access to these lands is critical. Again, it's right here in the Constitution, Article 8, Section 3. Common use and access to lands is critical to all Alaskans and to that future generation. And for too long, we've been given promises by the federal government that since statehood that we would have access to many of these easements, right-of-ways, and navigable waters. And it's time, after 50 years of governors promising to establishing these right-of-ways and access points, to take over. The federal government has failed to do that. That was their obligation they promised. And it's time that a governor actuate this so that we are the sovereign stewards of our state lands.
All right, thank you. Now Shelley Hughes.
Hello, I'm Shelley Hughes, and I've lived in Alaska 50 years, wife 48 years, 4 children, and Mimi of 12. And I started out living off the grid, totally dependent on hunting, fishing, clamming, gathering, gardening. It's part of who I am. It's part of my family. I have lived in every region of the state, so understand the various terrains, the various access issues and challenges. And I'm the only one of all the candidates who has a long and solid conservative track record and have kept my word once I was elected and voted that way. And I'm the only one who has proven I can navigate the tricky legislature. For all the issues regarding outdoor, there are many that have to travel that route. I know how to stand and fight when it's needed, but I have the wisdom to know when it's time to sit down at the table and build consensus without giving away the farm and without giving up my values. My vision for outdoor and for the economy, for our communities, it's not fluff, it's not slogans, it's not empty rhetoric. They are solutions with real, feasible, attainable steps. And you'll be hearing more about my plan to increase the abundance in the state and turn from a symptom of scarcity that we've had too long when it comes to outdoor wildlife and game and fish.
All right, thank you. Bernadette Wilson.
All right, well, I want to thank Alaska Outdoor Council for hosting us. I want to thank all of you that are here in the audience. I recognize a couple faces that even drove up from the Kenai area, and everyone who's watching across the state, whether you're watching on TV or whether you're watching through social media. It is very encouraging to see so many Alaskans come to the table, and all of you that participate in this state, whether it's sport, commercial, subsistence, fishing, hunting, all of you that are fighting and participating and showing us even tonight by sharing in this forum that's going on, your interest in making sure that our livelihood is secured and that those contributions that those industries make to our economy is secured. I was born in Kenai. I grew up here in Anchorage. My grandmother was born in the village of Naknek, so despite my blonde hair and my green eyes, I hail of Aleut descent. My great uncle was Governor Wally Hickel, who served as governor twice here in Alaska. And I come from a long line of family entrepreneurs. Businesses that have been in this state 40 years, 50 years. I've had the garbage business, my garbage business, for 11 years now in Alaska. So I love this state. It is home. It is far past time for us to have conversations regarding access and how we're going to make sure that we have abundant supplies both in our fishing and in our hunting. It is incredible to me how many years it has taken us to get to this point, and finally, we're having a solid conversation.
All right, thank you. All right, now we're at the lightning round. You should all have yes or no paddles at your places. and I will ask you 10 yes or no questions. And I know you can do this because you can hold up a paddle for yes or no. If you hold up both of them, I don't know what we're going to do. Okay, here we go. Question number 1. Will you support a statewide goal to maintain or expand public access to public lands and waters, including trails, easements, and traditional routes? Okay. Question 2. Should Alaska's salmon management prioritize Alaska resident anglers and in-state needs over the out-of-state commercial interests when runs are weak? Number 3, will you actively support and defend Second Amendment rights for law-abiding Alaskans, including opposing new state-level restrictions on firearms and ammunition? Question 4, will you oppose federal projects or designations that transfer or expand federal management authority over lands currently managed by the state, including proposals like the Alaska Long Trail designation, if it increases federal control over access or use? Number 5, would you ever support transferring state game management decision-making authority from Fish and Game to another entity outside of state government? Number 6. You want to do that one again? Okay. All right. Is everybody satisfied with their answer? Okay. All right, number 6. Would you support rebalancing Alaska hatchery production by reducing pink salmon releases in some regions if warranted, and increasing Chinook hatchery production where feasible? Number 7. Do you believe predator control can be an appropriate tool in specific areas when tied to clear objectives, monitoring, and public reporting, such as Alaska's intensive management program in the Mulchetna Caribou Range? Number 8. Should Alaska support new access roads when they expand public access and meet clear standards for fish habitat protection and enforceable mitigation, including the West Susitna Access Road? Number 9. Would you support a modest increase in hunting and sport fishing license and tag fees, with revenue restricted to a dedicated fund for access, habitat, and on-the-ground projects, not general spending? And number 10, when federal actions significantly reduce legal hunting, fishing, or access opportunity in Alaska, should the state actively challenge or negotiate changes rather than simply accept them? Okay. That was painless, right? Okay. Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a clarification. We can't make a dedicated fund.
Right.
It has to be a designated funds. That's a constitutional amendment to make
Right.
it a dedicated fund.
Okay, if it were a designated fund, what would your answer be?
Same answer.
Okay.
If you got the right governor and right commissioner, you don't have to worry about it.
All right, anyone else that has a comment on that? All right. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Shelley.
I would want the AOC and the outdoors sports hunting folks to support it, but I think they do because they've let me know that in the past.
Okay. All right, now let's get to the policy questions. This is the policy question round. There are 4 major policy questions. Each candidate will have 2 minutes per question, and I will announce the candidate order for each question. And I think you already have that down there, so but I'll mention it anyway. This is question number 1. Alaska has a lot going on right now, access roads, federal designations, hatchery production, predator control, moose numbers, and ongoing debates about who makes the decisions. Now, with all of that in mind, what is your top priority in Alaska's outdoor and fish and wildlife space? And what would you do in your first term to move it forward? And we'll start with Shelley Hughes.
Thank you. Well, I have just put out a video and a proposal, and it's on my website, so please check it out, alaskansforhughes.com. I think in 4 different ways I would step forward, because I believe we've been on a path to scarcity instead of one of abundance. And I will tell you that 19% of our nation's land is in Alaska, yet we harvest less than 1% of the wildlife in our nation. And we can look back and we can see where harvests have gone down. Over a 30-year period in Kenai, moose went down by 97%. So there are things we can do, and I would focus on several areas. The role of the commissioner would be to, number one, would to be manage our resources based on the sustained yield principle for the maximum benefit of the people who serve this state and built this state, all of us, rather than the predators. And we can turn things around if that is the focus. I would also, I propose various very specific action steps as far as changing the Board of Game process to allow the state biologists to provide their responses sooner so that the proposers have a chance to give a rebuttal if they choose, to allow independent research in addition to what the state biologists provide, and to allow the commissioner actually to make a recommendation that he or she believes would aim for the abundance that we need for the people of Alaska. I would also look at very specific steps to increase and grow our populations, to have that be the aim. For instance, same-day airborne culling of our predators, removing the 300-foot restriction, establishing moose ranges, controlled burns. Those are just some of the examples. And finally, I would look to engage our next generation by offering 4 credit classes in our high schools so that they can be engaged and be the good stewards we need going forward.
All right. Adam Crum.
There we go. This is a great question because growing up in Alaska, my dad got hurt in the 80s. We actually had to sell a lot of stuff and move to a 2-bedroom dry cabin in Anchor Point. And when you don't have a lot of money, getting access to fish and game is actually a very important thing. I ate so much salmon as a kid growing up, by the time I went to college, I actually couldn't stand the taste of salmon. I had tilapia my first time in the cafeteria at school, and I called my mom. She sent me a cooler full of salmon. I learned my lesson. But the important thing is to make sure that families have access to our fish and game resources. That is what we have to focus on, and that is what I would push in our first term. We have over 20,000 miles of RS 2477 easements across the state. We don't actually have enough trailheads to protect that resource. We need parking, we need designation there and trail markers to expand that so people can get out there. Because otherwise, if you don't have a really good defined trail set up, it's expensive to get there, and the cost of equipment can become a barrier of entry for all of Alaskans. It's more and more expensive with this awesome equipment that we have, but that shouldn't be a reason why Alaskans can't enjoy the resource. So my big priority would make sure that we actually focus not just on operating, but we have a big push on capital, and we build and develop Alaska's resources so people can go hunt, they can go fish. They can get out and recreate across this beautiful state and make sure that hunting, fishing, and trapping in our Alaska heritage is not something that is lost or something that is a limiting factor just because of how much money you make. This is what Alaskans are up here. If you're up here, you spend time, you survive our winters, you need the right to go access that land and enjoy that fishing game.
Okay. Bernadette Wilson.
So the question was, with all of the different priorities in mind, what is your top priority in Alaska's outdoor and fish and wildlife space? We have to fight like hell to make sure that Alaska is making the decisions. That has to be the number one priority. We are seeing right now much of these decisions being dictated to us by the federal government. They're being dictated to us by interests out of Seattle that are not here at home. So we can talk about predator control, we can talk about access issues, we can talk about all of the whole different list of things, you know, the hatchery production, anything else. Hands down, the biggest thing that we need to fight for in this space is to make sure that Alaska has the right to make those decisions. If we're talking specifically as we jump into all those different issues, I don't think that you can deny at all that the biggest issue right now in this space is trawling. We have got to absolutely address trawling that is raping Alaska's waters right now, throwing away hundreds of millions of pounds of bycatch every single year, 9 orcas in 2023. So I would argue that that issue, outside of fighting for Alaska, making sure that Alaska is making those decisions, in this space, that is arguably your next biggest area. We cannot go out and be building trails, you guys, while simultaneously we're letting them pull up all of the extra bycatch that they currently are. That issue needs to get addressed and tackled first and foremost so that we can get that under control, so that while we're out dealing with predator control, we're building roads, we're addressing access and all of these other things, we know that we've got that issue under control first and foremost.
All right, thank you. Click Bishop.
Thank you for that. First day in office, if I'm fortunate to get there, I'm going to have an administrative order to nominate or to name a standalone commissioner of game and a standalone commissioner of fish. 90% of that commissioner's time spent on fish issues. You've got 2 boards. You've got a fish board, you've got a game board. It's scriptural. You cannot serve 2 masters. Our game population is suffering where I hunt, where we hunt in the interior. And I know other parts of the state, it is suffering as well. Part of the things that I wanted to do, and I couldn't get it done as a senator because it's an airspace issue, and I had to defer to the Air Force pilot next to me, and is continue to work with the University of Alaska, Department of Fish and Game, to use drone technology and AI technology to have accurate surveys on our game populations. I know that they haven't flown 20F in over 25 years. That's not the department's fault. That's our fault and administration's fault for not funding the department to get the science. We talk a lot about the science in here, but we got to put our money where our mouth is. When there's a moose steak, a sheep steak in every skillet, everybody's happy. When there's a salmon steak or a halibut steak, everybody's happy. Also along those lines, I'm going to have another AO order that's going to make a standalone DNR, Mining, Land, and Water Commissioner, plus the Oil and Gas Commissioner. Access, we talked a lot about access. Our trails, we need to put more money into our trails so we don't continue to degrade the trails where the trails are bad. And the last thing is, I want clean restrooms for the women in this room on these highways so that when they go use it, they don't have to go to the brush on these pullouts. It's atrocious.
Okay. Matt Halala.
Can you hear me? There we go. Well, as governor, my first initiative will be, this is very interesting. I've done quite a bit of research and having a lot of conversations with people that know a lot more about these topics than I do. At statehood and following ANILCA, we were promised by the federal government that they would help mark out, maintain, and ensure access to traditional easements, trailways, and access ways into our state and even federal lands. And they've failed to do that. And as governor, right now we have an opportunity. We have an administration that is agreeable to this, and we have an environment with Chevron deference being eliminated at the Supreme Court. That means that the heads of agencies can no longer arbitrarily say you can't go there. And so as governor, under the guidance of my Attorney General and DNR Commissioner, we're going to immediately map out and steward our sovereignty in these traditional easements, right-of-way access points, and navigable waterways. So this is something we could do right away, and if the federal government chooses to sue us, so be it. But they had 70 years to do it. They did not do that. It's time for a governor. We have had 50 years of governors, some good, some not so good, promising to do this, and they've not done it. It is our opportunity right now, and it's going to happen under my watch from day one. That'll be a huge priority. So that's my number one.
Okay. And Dave Bronson.
Great, thanks. In any leadership job, and that's what you're looking at us for, is a leadership job, the first and most important function is the team that you build. Click's right in a lot of this stuff in that we need a separate commissioner for fish, and we need a separate commissioner for game. This is getting way too complicated in this state. So with that, I agree with you, Click. But at the end of the day, there's a couple ethoses here. And one is control, the other is access, and the other is abundance. We need control of our lands. We need that from the federal government. I often say this, we're not a colony. We're not your federal park. If you don't live in Alaska in the wintertime, if you don't get a permanent PFD, kindly bow out and go home. Just come in the summertime and leave all your money. My focus is we need to get control of our resources, and everyone else is in agreement on that. And then we need access to those resources. Again, I focus on that in my opening statement. Access is everything. If you don't have access, everything starts with a pickup truck. Even if you've got an airplane, you drive your pickup truck to your plane, load your plane, and go. If it's a boat, it's the same thing. Or you just may be able to be lucky enough to hunt out of the back of a pickup truck. I'm real envious of that. If you can do that, but you got to have access. If you got a pickup truck and you don't have access, you're not going to hunt and you're not going to fish. So, and then the other thing is simply abundance. Something's going wrong. I hunt a lot and I fly a great deal in 16B. I'm trying to figure out where the moose were. When Corey Rossi was running the predator control program in 16B or throughout the state, we had a lot, and it turned a corner in a minute. We went from very few moose to a lot of moose. So something's going wrong. We're not managing right. And I just want access, or I want the same opportunity for our kids and our grandkids to shoot a moose and catch a king salmon. It's real simple stuff.
All right. The next question. Our recent member survey ranked trawl bycatch and sustainable fishing practices as their highest priorities. What are your two top fisheries management priorities to improve conservation outcomes? And what specific changes would you pursue to get there? We'll start with Bernadette Wilson.
Well, first of all, Click, I'm very impressed with your knowledge of the condition of the women's restrooms. So I will say this, we've talked a lot about trawling on this campaign, and I'm very proud of the fact that we were the very first campaign to lead big time on this issue. In fact, I've made the commitment to not take any money from the trawl industry, and so I want to make sure that we have that on the record. We need to have a conversation about the gear that is being used with our trawlers. We need to have a conversation about observers on boats. We need to have a governor who's going to make the commitment, as I have had, that our different fisheries boards, when the governor has the opportunity to nominate, to make sure that those nominations do not have conflicts of interest with that particular industry. And finally, I will tell you that we need to work to entice these different industries so that they have buy-in and they too want zero bycatch. We need to be working towards a zero bycatch number, and not just with coming down on restrictions, but figuring out how can we entice them so that we have that buy-in as well. So do we need to come down with a heavy hand? Absolutely. But do we need to come in and sit down at the table and say, let's have a conversation about this and figure out how can we get them to want to share that common goal with us? That's another big part of that conversation in regards to trawling.
All right. Matt Halala.
Yes. So I don't know if I mentioned I was a sport and commercial fisherman for much of my life. And I didn't know a lot about trawling, but I did notice, obviously, in the last year, it's become a very emotional and divisive issue. And my instinct, when people are rushing into the feeding frenzy, making decisions, putting out rapid responses of what they believe, what they don't, my instinct is, unless I'm pushed, sit back, let that discussion take place, have meetings with people that know what they're talking about, that know more than what I know, and discover what the best approach is. I'm very conservation-minded. We want sustainable fisheries, near shore, offshore. We want job opportunities for the next generation. We love the CDQ share fisheries for the villages along our coast that own now a third of the trawl fleet. They're a huge interest in that. I looked into the bycatch issue. It's a problem. It is improving. I like what the North Pacific Fisheries Management Council just did with a hard bycatch limit. It's a good start. Zero bycatch is not possible at this point unless we get the magic of AI working for us, which might happen in the next 10 to 20 years. We have to recognize that arguing to the death of one fishery and another has consequences, that the stools of our commercial fishery industry is codependent on one another. And I've had conversations about trying to enact things that are not possible, like zero bycatch could eliminate the processing of even our salmon fishery. So being the largest employer of our state, I'm very conscious of that. We need to revisit the amendment fleet. They're the ones having most of the bycatch. We need to reanalyze that. We also need to look at areas like Prince William Sound. Is that critically important? Also, Arabella advisors, George Soros, Zuckerberg are getting us to fight with each other. They are sponsoring Salmon State and behind the fight. So be cautious.
Dave Bronson.
When I got into this race, we really didn't hear much about trawl. I know it was an issue out there, and then we started looking into it. And I came to the conclusion over a period of research of a couple months that something is terribly wrong here. There's a tactic that they use at the federal level as they coordinate with the commercial trawlers, and I'm talking of the large commercial processing trawlers, is fund more studies, do more studies, and nothing ever gets done. At the end of the day, is what's going on is we're killing too many fish. We haven't even classified North Pacific pollock as a forage fish, so you don't really keep track of it other than the amount that you catch. You don't know how much is too much. They're meeting their quotas, their max limits, but the problem is a forage fish is the fish that turns zooplankton, phytoplankton, and krill into food. They eat it, and then other things eat them. When you take that many fish out of an ecosystem, what's left for the kings? What's left for the chums, especially out west? The other problem we have is in our hatcheries, we make way too many pink salmon. Pink salmon are an incredibly aggressive salmon. They're smaller, but they eat the small kings and the small chums and the small silvers. And those are the fish that are valuable to us. It's the kings, it's the reds and the silvers. Those are the valuable sport fish. And at the end of the day, it seems to me that the sport fishermen and the subsistence fishermen are left holding the bag. They always get cut when there's a time to cut, but nothing happens to the large commercial processing trawler fleet. And that's a sad thing because we are constitutionally obligated, whoever wins this rate, constitutionally obligated to manage the resource for the max benefit of Alaskans. Nobody else. Not commercial interests from Tacoma. That's what we're required to do, and I hope every one of us would agree to do that.
Shelley Hughes.
So, we like snow plows, but we don't like fish plows. Right now, when you look at it, the amount per hour of bycatch is 8 tons per hour. So we do have a situation, and we do have the history of the northeastern and the Atlantic fisheries being decimated there. So this is a serious thing. Fish is part of our culture. Fish and wildlife is why many of us live here. And so we have to understand we're hitting a critical point where we have to address this. And it doesn't matter whether someone was first, but I actually took a stand on it back in May. There's a bill in the legislature that makes sense of setting the precedent and showing what we can do in state waters. It's Senator Cronk's bill, and recognized at that time. And then I started to study the issue over the summer and fall and met with many people. And the approach is a 3-pronged approach. I put it out in an 11-minute video at the end of last year. I encourage you to watch it. It's very specific, the things as steps. Like I said, I don't throw out slogans and empty rhetoric. It's got to be something you can do. You vet the members that go on to the North Pacific Fishery Council, very, very important that they all stay on the same page with your commissioner. And the restrictions, just need to stick with them. There are other things that we can discuss, such as undercover troopers as observers is a possibility. 24/7 electronic monitoring. There's a number of things that make sense. And I did have a conversation. It's interesting that the unmanned vehicles underwater possibly could help also as our technology advances. But I want to tell you, I'm not waiting until I'm governor. I've already submitted comments to NOAA. I've already submitted comments to International, the Pacific Halibut Commission, to the NPFMC, and I've written legislators to move SB 161. I'm not waiting till I'm governor. This is a serious issue and we need to address it now.
All right, Click Bishop.
Thank you. Hopefully you have another forum after the primary election, and the whole forum's just on this topic so we can get into the meat of it, because it's that important. And there's a lot that you're not hearing. So with that being said, the most important thing the next governor is going to make on this issue is the 2 appointments to the North Pacific Fisheries Council. All right. So my position is Alaska trawl fisheries must operate with the highest standards. We need to reduce bycatch with stronger management and better technology. Require 100% observer coverage on the all boats, and genetically test all harvested fish. Any incidental or prohibited fish should be, again, taken to our local food bank so they can be distributed around Alaska. We are very appreciative of the fish that we get on the Yukon from the processors, because we're on a 7-year moratorium. There is nobody feeling it any worse than we're feeling it on the Yukon, period. So people have talked a lot about bycatch, but if you believe the science, 52% bycatch of chum salmon, less than 2% are AYK Kuskokwim fish. The rest are Asian fish, if you believe the science. We got 60 years worth of scale samples that have not been inventoried in the Alaska Department of Fish and Game. They tell a whole story. So I want to talk about, if I'm elected, going to the president, the State Department, our delegation, to open up treaty conversations with Asia. There's 760 hatcheries over there. We should kill every Asian chum that we can kill. Thank you.
Okay. And Adam Crum.
I think by the end of this, I'll figure out how to work the mic. Growing up in Anchor Point, the Anchor River was a fantastic king salmon fishery. It had dolly varden, had steelhead, catch and release, but it was still fun. But we haven't been able to catch fish there in a very long time because we've had a very diminished, hard-hit river run. Move to the Mat-Su, the Susitna drainage is no longer a salmon fishery. 20 years ago, that was like 67% of all the sport-caught kings was actually in the Susitna drainage. We do not have that anymore. We need to find a way to actually figure out what is going on. And the reality is there are very, very few levers that the governor has in order to affect this in the near term. One of the only ones would actually be the banning of state trawling and the 3 fisheries in state trawling. That is the bill that is moving through the legislature right now, thanks to Senator Cronk. I think that is one of the things we have to do. I think actually opening up and working with the federal delegation on the treaties is another big issue that we have to address. Because Alaska is such a big state, we have as much coastline as the rest of the United States put together. It is not just one area that matters. Not only that, those fish then go inland thousands of miles across Alaska. We have to make sure that we are making that they're taken care of. I would say take care of the trawling in the state waters, and then it's also how we're actually going to manage it. I think that the genetic processing, I think the inventory thing that he mentioned over 60 years, there's rapid genetic testing that we need to invest in or make the processors and the fishing fleets themselves invest in to put on those boats to prove whether or not it's an intercept fishery of these Asian fish or if it's Yukon or Kuskokwim, because we know where the fish go. We can do that. And I think with 100% observer and using the camera technology, AI is what is going to help us monitor this bycatch across the board. Hard caps on bycatch is a thing. And I'd say the last thing I want to push for is growing up around them is pink salmon hatcheries. The data around that, there's a growing body of evidence that pink salmon are out there. They are actually over-ranching our oceans. And they're taking out the fish that is of the value. Because Alaska is known for its salmon. It's not known for its fish sticks.
All right. Question number 3. After the Supreme Court declined to hear the state's appeal in the Kuskokwim case, what practical steps would you pursue to regain management and allocation influence on federal lands and waters? And we'll start with Click Bishop.
Thank you for the question, and it's timely. The Supreme Court didn't even open up the state's arguments. It's my understanding, and I'm not the attorney, but with that being said, the last thing you want to do is go to court, and especially you don't want to go to court with the federal government. Now, I'll go to court with the federal government, but we're going to have a lead pipe cinch that we got a damn good case. I would use all assets to negotiate in good faith, working with the federal government, bring them to Alaska, show them on the ground what we've got going, work with our delegation, and just bring all assets to bear with good people skills, having good people inside the administration that are experts in these areas. I'll just give you an example as a former cabinet member, and maybe Adam has heard this as well. We don't really, taking on a polar bear on the North Slope for an oil and gas production, you know what a taking is? Is if you look at that bear when you're driving to the work site, you got to report that as a taking. That's crazy, right? I mean, that's where I think we could work with our ASRC, the North Slope Borough, their Marine Mammal Division, to work and collaborate and share resources to make the argument. They're the ones that told the feds that the bowhead lives to be 100 years. Nobody believed them until they pulled a harpoon out of one that was inscripted in 1878. Use the local knowledge.
Dave Bronson.
Well, you don't want to go to court with the federal government, that's for sure. But guess what? Sometimes you're going to have to. And our governor has done that several times. Also, I want to compliment AOC, SCI, in their support of John Sturgeon's, both his cases. He went to the federal government on this issue, the issue of navigable water access, and he won twice. And I believe they were both unanimous. So, yeah, you have to fight sometime. And again, it comes down to a common three themes, and that's control, access, and abundance. We need control. We need control from the federal government and put it in the hands of state regulators, state managers, and state biologists. We need our access. We beat that one kind of to death. And again, the objective is abundance. If we had enough fish right now in the YK, if we had enough fish in Prince William Sound where I do most of my saltwater fishing, we wouldn't be having these conversations. But something is terribly going wrong. I hate to keep coming back to that. I'm not a little Debbie naysayer, but we keep hearing this, that let's just keep studying some more. Let's keep looking at it. I've made a commitment. I'm not going to take money from the trawl industry. It's not that they're evil people. I've sat down with the owner of Trident, and I spent 2 hours with him. I says, "You're a great guy. I like you. You think you're doing something great, but I'm not going to take any money from you." And I told him this. I says, anybody in this race who takes money from you right now is in big trouble. They're not going to win. And he didn't like that. But he's a good guy. There's no villains here. There's a bunch of people trying to do the best they can in this world. But we're taking, when it comes to especially our saltwater fish and our trawl issue, we're taking too many fish. Something's wrong. The salmon aren't getting enough food. Whales are turning up. I know this is an outlier story, but the whales are turning up in the summertime, or in the wintertime in California, that summer up here, and they're starved. What's going on? At some point, you just say, stop the music and figure this thing out.
Ding. We lost you lost the bell? Lost the bell. All right. I'll make a ding sound.
I'll yell, you guys.
Okay. You want to yell?
Sure.
Allison will yell. Okay. All right. Let's go to Adam Crum.
So with this, if you're not familiar with what this case was, this should have been done 30 years ago. But proud that the governor of the Fish and Game actually pushed this case bringing this forward, fighting against Title VIII of ANILCA. And it's the definition of public lands. With this cert denial, it does effectively cement the Ninth Circuit Court's ruling of ANILCA and the Katie John line, but it doesn't foreclose other legal and political actions that we can take. State of Alaska has to continue to fight for its resources. If that was very, very clear in my intro, that under Article 8, we have the right to actually manage our own resources for the maximum benefit of Alaskans. Not only that, but at statehood, this is something that we were actually promised. So we have to continue to push for that. So while that is a legislation that is not going to get overturned, because amending Title VIII of ANILCA is a very, very politically arduous task. Don't think that's going to happen. But what we can do is understand that not just statute governs the Federal Subsistence Board. It is also regulation. So working with the Department of Interior and Agriculture, we can revise Federal Subsistence Board regulations and policies within ANILCA's bounds. This is something that we have a president in place, and President Trump, who actually has been the best president for Alaska when it comes to giving us our rights back. Secretary of Interior just giving us Public Land Order 5150 and 5180, where for the first time we have control over the Dalton Highway Corridor, is key in that. There's a lot of steps in place that we can do to work with this administration to actually amend those rules to bring the rights and the power back home to Alaska where it should be. And so I'd say the concrete thing that I would do to pursue this would just be participate aggressively with extreme ownership in any federal rulemaking process that has to do with this subject area, and to continue to demand that we actually work towards this, because the conflict between user groups and these invisible fences is not something that is going to be amenable in the future. We have got to find a way to do this, particularly in times of shortage, and about where it is. If it's subsistence shortfall or if it's a rural priority, this has got to be defined for all of Alaska.
Matt Halala.
Hello. There we go. Well, again, I think as the governor, there is a great opportunity to honor access to promised historic lands, trails, easements, and navigable waterways by establishing the right to that was promised to us 50 to 70 years ago. And we don't have to go to the federal government and sue them for this. We establish it. The opportunity right now is we have an administration that will recognize, with the current Supreme Court decision of Chevron deference being ended, that department heads no longer have it at their discretion to decide who has access, who does not. I'm going to parade around as governor our Constitution in Article 8, Section 3, common use for sustainable harvest, for recreational use and development, for the betterment and the advantage of the next generation. So it's a real opportunity. I believe in the principle of subsidiarity, where rules, regulations, and procedures that are created must be created as close to the beneficial user as possible. Local, state, and federal is the last. I don't like this hierarchy. I'm also not a believer in doubling down on government by establishing new commissions, a new board of fish, new board of game. That is expanding the bureaucracy. Simplifying things is the answer. We need to delete things, reduce complexity in government and the morass that has become government, permitting and regulation. We have an opportunity right now. A governor has an obligation to do what the federal government has failed to do in mapping out and establishing these 17B and 2477 easements, right-of-ways, and navigable waters. So that's what I would do.
Shelley Hughes.
If we've ever had a federal administration that would want to work with us, it is now, and we have to take advantage of it on day one. Up until before the holidays, I was the vice chair of the National Federalism Commission, which represented the 50 states. Federalism is about the balance that our founders intended between the state governments and the federal government. As we all know, the federal government is much more powerful, and so working on that has been key. My Attorney General will have a strong philosophy of federalism. I not only want to ensure that we have influence over the state, over the management and allocation influence on federal lands, but I actually believe that we should go after some of those federal lands. 62% of Alaska is owned by the federal government. New York, only 1%. We didn't enter the union on an equal footing, and I think we have a case to be made. So not only do we need as a state to have control over the federal lands, but we need to get some of that federal land grab back that should have never occurred. So yes, you work and you negotiate and you have conversations, but you may have to go back to court, and we will do that if we need to do that. And my goal is actually management over all the state lands, because I know the abundance would be greater. And those that are resisting that believe maybe they're getting more by having federal control, we will show them how the state management, as we increase our herds, they will want state manage over federal lands. And we will win their support, which will then help us in DC. But there's never been a better time. We have 2 years, once the governor is elected, to get a lot of things done. And that's why it's so important to have someone with the experience, with the relationships, with the ability to stand and fight, and the willingness and the wisdom to sit down and negotiate. And that's what I'll do.
Bernadette Wilson.
So a lot of the answer to this, you guys, unfortunately, is you got to get outside of your bubble and outside of the boundaries of the state of Alaska. And we can all sit here and we can all talk to each other about all the problems and all the solutions. The reality is, when we talk about the federal government, who are we talking about? We're talking about people back in DC. The state of Alaska has a staffed office back in Washington, DC, that sometimes has been staffed, sometimes it hasn't been staffed. When it is staffed, it is largely resource development projects that take front and center stage, all very good. But I don't remember the last time that we had that office staffed in DC where we made access and fishing and hunting issues a priority. And it absolutely needs to be. Because those are the people that we have to convince. Those are the people that we have to have a conversation with. So if you want to talk about where do we start, it absolutely starts with a conversation back with those people that are making the decisions. But I will also say this. There's a lot of hesitancy up on this stage to go to court. Why? We have tried for decades, you guys, to get along with the federal government. We've tried to say, well, we're going to sit back and we're just going to watch. We're going to see how this goes. Well, we'll have nice conversations. We are sitting here in the situation that we are in today, not because we failed to act the last 2 years or the last 5 years or the last 10, because we have failed to act for decades. Because finally last year, for the first time in the state legislature, we saw a piece of legislation get introduced by Senator Mike Cronk. You didn't see legislation introduced previous years. There's people up on the stage that didn't sign on to that legislation as a co-sponsor. The reality is, we have got to get somebody in this governor's office who is not risk adverse. You've got to get in there. You've got to take the risk. You've got to go and you've got to tell the federal government, if we sue you over and over and over again, if we have to keep going to court over and over again, then by God we will, because it's time to stand up and fight.
All right. Question 4, the last question in this policy question segment. The governor of Alaska appoints 6 seats to the North Pacific Fisheries Management Council. What would be your criteria to appoint these seats, and what would be the policy outcome you would be looking to obtain? And we'll start with Adam Crum.
It's a good question. To lay this out, you have to look for people that are actual genuine Alaskans. I think right now we have far too much bias of single industry on the North Pacific Council. We have to make sure that we're actually getting representation from Alaskans. It depends on how people have done this. You don't want people that are stepping into this, because it's disrespectful for everyone who has worked in the commercial fishing industry policy and also sport fishing just to say you can walk into this. This is a very, very complicated subject that has been debated on for 50, 60 years. The way these topics get tossed in and out is, we're just interlopers in this unless we've ever worked in that industry. So this is something you have to make sure is how these people are, what is their heart for Alaska, and it always goes back down to mission base. Who are you serving? What role are you doing? Is it the mission of the seat to serve Alaskans, or is it to serve an industry? That is the key thing that is going to be part of the litmus test. So the people that I would appoint as governor as to that board seat are, though, going there to serve the people of Alaska, to make sure that Alaskans are fairly represented on this board, to make sure that industry does not have an over-preference, and that you're doing this in a thoughtful way. But you go about this and you have to make sure that you're treating everyone with respect and going through this, but it's a very real situation that is affecting Alaskans' lives and livelihood and culture and our heritage. This is something that we have to dive into to make sure that we take this a very serious approach, because what we do now is going to set up whether or not we have returning fishing runs or whether or not we've already seen the peak. And I want to make sure that my daughters have the chance to go catch salmon and halibut in Kashmak Bay just like I did. This is something that we have to take very, very seriously to make sure, are you going to perform the mission and go take care of Alaskans and represent that seat solely? That is what the goal is.
All right. Shelley Hughes.
Yes, vetting these candidates will be of utmost importance, and I will make sure that they are going to make their decisions based on science, and will do the homework to do it. It's very complicated and heavy, as been mentioned. That their focus is science, abundance, fairness, and Alaska first. So those 4 things, very important. And that they also are looking at the policies and restrictions that the commissioner, because the commissioner would be on there also, and that they would stay all on one page together. And some of those particular policies, that if they stayed, because there's 11 on the commission, right? They would have 6 seats, so they could actually pass these things, whether those be restrictions on chum more so than what they did just recently. I'd also make sure, I want to say, the conflict of interest thing is very concerning. So that needs to make sure we're not going to have anyone that maybe they don't own, or maybe in the trawl industry, but they don't work for the trawl industry, or they're not related to someone for the trawl industry. We want people that are Alaska first. But those specific restrictions also, I would be vetting them and ask them, could you agree on a pretty tough cap on chum salmon, for instance? Could you agree on things that would prohibit midwater trawlers from touching the bottom, that they'd have to stay midwater? Would you agree to prohibiting trawling where there are halibut nurseries? So we would get very specific in the vetting process to make sure everyone is on the same page. There is no reason, when Alaska has 6 seats out of 11, that we aren't able to fix this, and it will get fixed as your governor by the choices I'll make with that.
All right, Dave Bronson.
Well, first and foremost, the governor does not appoint 6 people to the board, to the NPFMC. He nominates 3 people for every seat that comes open, and the Secretary of Commerce appoints to those seats. And we just hope he'll appoint the number 1 choice. So, but that's first and foremost. Trawling is the great challenge that we're facing in our fisheries. Again, I've committed to not taking money from the trawling industry. But to the selection of the people, one, I have a real problem with just the 6. The reason being is that we have people from the lower 48 on the board making decisions on North Pacific fisheries. That's almost an exclusive Alaska area. But to the people specifically that I would nominate to the NPFMC, they would be dominated by sport fishing and subsistence fishery, and Alaska local commercial fishermen. We've got people on the board right now, the sport fishing representative who's supposed to represent that industry. His college at UAF was paid for by the trawl industry. I'm questioning his loyalty. I just do that. I'm not going to mention his name. I don't know the guy, but this is how things work, and they're not supposed to work. We're supposed to appoint the right people that represent Alaska. As the governor of Alaska, you are compelled by law to represent the people of Alaska by managing for abundance, and we've said it over and over again here. The Constitution is quite clear. We're all, whoever wins this, is going to take an oath to the Constitution, and you just don't get to ignore that. That isn't what we get to do, and it's abundance, it's control, again, and it's access.
Okay. Click Bishop.
All right, thank you. The question is, it's a good one, and you're going to have to spend a lot of time to get the right person. And the right person is the one that probably tells you no the first time. and no the second time, and you got to go with your hat in your hand to get them to say yes on the third time. That's the caliber of people that you need on this board for these 2 seats. The next uphill battle is, and I talked about it a little bit and listened to the conversation, and it's all good here. How do we convince people to believe the science? That's the uphill battle. You got to believe the science, because I just said earlier, we do not know how many AYK, Kuskokwim, chums, or kings that are caught when you draw a line through the donut hole in the Bering Sea. We do not know what they catch on the other side. We know what we catch over here, and I just gave you an example of 2018, 2%, and that related chum bycatch, AYK, Kuskokwim, chums, and if you believe the science, that's 616 fish up the Yukon and 400 up to Kuskokwim. I fished on the Yukon, and in good years, in a good wheel spot, you can catch 3,000 fish in a 24-hour period. So, you go get the best person that you can get, and you got to go with your hat in your hand to get them. That's the caliber of people that I'm looking for. Thank you.
Okay. Matt Halala.
Well, the question being, how would I go about appointing members or nominating members to this council? And first of all, I would not likely be looking at politicians and bureaucrats that get very confused about knowing things and have the courage to actually make the right decision and speak up. We see this time and time again in councils and committees and things where, you know, the knowledge was there, but people look to the leader to tell them what to think. And there's always a dominant personality. We saw it during the COVID issue. The science was ignored. This happens over and over again. Right now, the transgender care of kids, the AMA, the American Society of Plastic Surgery, all these organizations that we admire, very few leaders stand up and do the right thing. So you have to have a criteria of individuals of knowledge, experience, and courage. They have to have a domain of expertise that's relevant, right? We need to have people that have their heart in Alaska. That's very true. I think in politics, you know, we're always looking for the best slogan, but, you know, very often politicians are 1 or 2 slogans short of a meaningful statement. And that's a sad thing. And I think we need to be very balanced in our approach with making decisions that affect tens of thousands of families. And we have to be very slow and measured. It's not about making the punchiest statement that's going to rile up the crowd. That is not my approach. It never is. And it wins out in the end when people remember when people raced to judge something when they didn't have all of the information. So people of discipline, people of integrity that have the appropriate domain of expertise and a balance of industry and conservation. And you've got to gain the public's trust in this. That's the biggest thing, is gaining the public's trust. And I think that can happen with a balanced approach and appointing people of character, integrity, and courage.
All right, Bernadette Wilson.
So the unfortunate reality is that we have had multiple previous governors across both parties, it knows no specific party, that have nominated all trawlers to these fishing boards. That needs to end. So we need to start by making sure that not only do they have Alaska's best interests at heart, that they have the experience, that they have the knowledge, but that they absolutely do not have a conflict of industry. That particular industry right now is well represented, I would argue overrepresented, and it's time for us to appoint individuals that do not have that conflict of interest. The other thing is they need to share a vision with us. Now, I heard the comment made up here today on this stage, we are not going to eliminate bycatch all the way. By God, you better get people on that board that share that vision, that understand that that is your North Star. Is it attainable? To what degree is it attainable? But we're gonna go fight like hell to try to get there. So they've got to share that vision. The other thing is this, they've got to be disruptors. And I said this earlier, but we have gone for far too long with the idea of, well, we're just going to sit back and we're going to try to get along. Let's see if we can just have a conversation. We need to be very slow about this. We need to be methodical. You don't have a choice anymore. That's the reality. For all of you watching, you don't have a choice. You have got to move quickly on this issue, and you've got to get people in there that say, you know what, I'm here to disrupt the system. I'm not here to get along. I'm not here to make my new best friend or figure out where my next job is. It does not have to be chaotic, but it does indeed need to be disruptive if we are going to dramatically change the direction that we are headed.
All right, thank you. We are now in the audience question segment, and we have an audience question, which I have right here. We will ask the question, and each candidate has up to 1 minute to respond. So here is the question. If you were to receive SB 161/HB 203 on your desk, which will prohibit bottom trawling in state waters, how would you pass or veto the bill? And we'll start with Bernadette Wilson.
Well, that's a pretty simple pass, yes. I think that there's a lot more that needs to be done, but that bill is most certainly a good step in the right direction. And I will tell you, it's shocking to watch that bill even last year, had very few co-sponsors on it. It didn't hardly go anywhere, and there's, strong rumor this year that it's not even going to be heard. So is that bill a good start? Yes. Would I support it? Absolutely. But I'll tell you, I'll take it one step further, and that's this. Your next governor needs to get very strong with the legislature. The next governor needs to come in, set up a super PAC, set up an independent expenditure so that those legislators that are sitting on those committees that are blocking bills like this one from being heard, blocking them from being passed, we can go into their districts, we can educate people on this topic and have a conversation with those individuals in their district to let them know what their legislator is doing. It goes beyond the governor simply saying, yes, I support this. You've got to get aggressive with those legislators.
All right, Matt Halala.
So with that bill, it's my understanding that one of the sponsors, co-sponsors, is having doubts about that because they didn't have all of the information. They didn't realize that trawling within state waters involves small family operations that rely on that. They are pelagic, they're not bumping the bottom. In the rarest of cases they may, but these are trawl operations that are the small mom and pop trawl operations. So without any caveat, as evidenced by what I'm hearing about even the people initially supporting this bill, they didn't have all the information. So we have to be very cautious about jumping on the bandwagon when we don't really know what the consequence is. So I'm always very cautious for Alaskan families and their jobs. That has to be balanced, obviously, with conservation. Now, there are areas like Prince William Sound that is within state waters that might very well be a wise place to start with some kind of a ban. There is such an overlap with recreational sport fishing and small commercial fisheries there. So that's the caveat there.
All right. Dave Bronson.
Well, I wouldn't agree to a bill that I haven't seen the final version of, if so, and the governor to sign off or veto a bill. But the principle I agree with in SB 161. The issue we can't forget here is the governor has jurisdiction in only 3 miles. And that really limits, especially if there's no islands or anything else in the area, any landmass. Your jurisdiction is extremely limited. So would it be meaningful? I don't know. This notion that pelagic nets, trawl nets rarely touch the bottom. The number is 20% to 100% of the nets touch the bottom. That's the fact. If they come up with a starfish in there or a crab, it touched the bottom. That's kind of real simple stuff. But I support the bill if it's the language that I can agree on, or language I would read before I would either pass or veto.
All right. Shelley Hughes.
It is always wise to see what is in the bill at the final, and I do think that as the bill would move through the process, you would see some restrictions put in there that actually would probably let families that rely on it maybe continue if they're willing to abide by those, and if they're not, then they'll have to find something else to do. But I also want to say that I'm going to use the bully pulpit like no other governor has. And I want you to know right now, the chairs of the committee where these bills reside are taking support and funding from the trawl side of industry, and that's the problem. So the only way, if you're interested in this, if you're watching, you're sitting here live in this room, and you want to see some movement and discussion, you're going to have to press the legislature, and that is why I made the decision on the very first day of the legislature to contact legislatures and send the statement why they need to hear and move that bill. But I can tell you, Senator Kathy Giessel and Representative Louise Stutes are chairing the committees where those bills are, and they are on the side of against the bill.
All right, Click Bishop.
Thank you. I too, I've seen lawmakers vote against their own bill at the end of the day when it comes to the floor because they don't even recognize it. The title is the only thing they recognize. But with this, in all seriousness, in this case, as the bill's written today, I can't say whether I would or I wouldn't because the process is not complete. There is a couple of outstanding issues on the definition of gear types for shrimping and scallop gear. We all like scallops. We were in Cordova a week ago, and they're finding some new technology on how to catch scallops. But so with that being said, Section 2 of the bill, and I know people aren't going to like this, but in the bill it calls for more studies on this issue. Thank you.
Okay, and Adam Crum.
Well, this is a freebie because I mentioned this earlier that I would support it. But as it was presented, I do think that you have to have language in there. That's the hard part with legislation, is making sure that you can thread the needle, that it doesn't ban actually upcoming or new technology on this, and you need a new law in order to implement. But I did think a lot of studies are actually showing that salmon, as they return back, they're not swimming out in the open ocean. They're staying close to the shore. And those fisheries that are close to the shore, that's what we have the most control over. That's where we actually need to limit as much as possible on that intercept so those fish can actually get home and make baby salmon. So yes, as it was initially presented, but again, the final document, but this is absolutely a concept that I support.
Okay. We are now at the stage of closing statements. And I've got to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, you've done an admirable job tonight. This has been very informative, and I think that let's have a round of applause at this point. Thank you. Closing statements. You'll have a minute, and of course, a minute to ask you this question: why should Alaskans trust you to lead the state and protect our outdoor heritage? That's a big question. But you got a minute. So let's start with Bernadette Wilson.
All right, well, thank you to Alaska Outdoor Council for having this event. You know, there were comments that were made up here today that getting rid of bycatch was not possible, that we needed to sit back and that we needed to see how the conversation went, or that we needed to perhaps expand government. I don't know a single time in this state where expanding government has helped any industry. So there are definitely some stark differences up here. But you'll notice that during the yes or no questions, there's also a lot of alignment. So I will encourage you to consider this. I am not naive to the fact that everyone comes through on the campaign trail and makes big promises to each of you about what they're going to do. Everybody jumps on the bandwagon, and suddenly in the last few months, everyone is an expert on trawl, despite the fact that this issue has been going on for years. But now everyone jumps up and we're ready to go. I would encourage you to consider that history shows us, both past and present, those that have come from outside government are the ones that have been able to deliver.
All right, Shelley Hughes.
So Article 8 is not optional, it's a mandate. It is our playbook, and I believe it's time to bake more pie instead of fighting over the dwindling last piece. So that's going to be a focus. How do you know you can trust me? I've got a track record. I've got a proven. What I said when I very first ran, I have kept to. I voted that way. I keep my word. I can't sleep at night if I don't keep my word. I don't make promises I can't keep. The solutions that I'm offering that you can see at my website, alaskansforhughes.com, and on my social media, Alaskans for Hughes, the videos, those are feasible things that we are going to do beginning on day one. It's going to take an effective leader to get us out of some of these messes, including the bycatch. So you want to make sure you can have someone you can trust. I've shown you that I can. Many of the other candidates, you don't know. You're taking a risk. We'd hope they'd stick to their word. You know I will stick to my word. Thank you.
Matt Halala.
Thank you, AOC. I'm not a politician. I'm not a bureaucrat. I come from real life, Deep Roots, Alaska, across multiple sectors. I'm a father. I'm a grandfather. I'm worried about the next generation. We know that through cheap, abundant energy and transportation, that'll provide the foundation of the possibility of high-paid jobs for the next generation. The next piece of my priority as governor is the transparency piece. And I think that's what we're all looking for. We're all looking for transparency. Where are these decisions being made? Who are making these decisions? They should not be people of mixed motive. And I think we need to come together, not allow people to get us pointing guns at each other when we can align for the betterment of the next generation. You know, don't be fooled by the Arabella advisors, George Soros and Zuckerberg. They're getting us to fight with each other. We need transparency all around for the benefit of that next generation. Thank you.
Adam Crum.
Caleb, this was a great idea. I think far too often AOC, they haven't actually brought together the governor candidates to actually have these broad discussions. We didn't even get to many topics, even when it comes to like moose population or even in-depth on predator control. There's a lot more that we can discuss on this because there's so much about Alaska that depends upon what this group represents and who you protect. I'm an Alaskan kid, grew up on the Kenai Peninsula, I live in the Mat-Su. I live this life. I snow machine, I got six-wheelers, we go out, we hunt, and we fish. My parents live off grid. They take an Argo to get to their house. Trail access is literally a way of life for us. This is something that is very important. On top of that, I've led some of the largest organizations in the state, thousands of employees and billions of dollars of budgets. This is not a new thing for me in order to figure out what is important and how you actually can effectuate change and make sure you can move the needle for Alaskan. And on top of that, while I've got experience, I have to be responsible for the way I govern. I have to live here after I'm done.
Dave Bronson.
AOC, great venue. Caleb, great job. Really appreciate that. There's some people that will tell you, vote for me, I have no experience in government. Have you ever hired anybody who has no experience? Would you ever want to? At the end of the day, and that was me when I led this town out of COVID, I had no experience. And that was difficult. That was really, it took a lot of OJT. We don't have time in the governor's office for OJT. We don't have time for people that have never been in government and never led large organizations. I led this city. This is the closest single job to the governor's job in the state of Alaska. It's a political executive position. I've already done the job. I have the experience. There's a lot of issues, by the way, out there besides trawl. We've talked about them. Access for our four-wheelers, access for our boats. We get that. You can't just focus on one issue, and that's trawl. You got to focus on everything, who you're going to hire and what team you're going to build. And I've got that experience, and quite frankly, I'm the only one with that experience.
All right, Click Bishop.
Well, I respectfully disagree with that, but as far as leadership abilities, but anyway, I'm going to put a pike bounty on in the Mat-Su, and you got to be 0 to 17 years old. They're an invasive species, eating all them salmon fry going back home. When I was a kid at Summit Lake, we used to get the little tags from ADF&G, and they were $1 a tag, and so you could report back to Fish and Game about the fish and where they came from, okay? So Norway, Finland, they shoot 70,000 moose a year. We shot 7,000 last year. They've got an active forest management. They use drone AI technology. And one of the two things that we worked on in 2014 and then 3 years ago when I was in the Senate was on guide concession programs. I think that's important. They were brought to us by some guides, and I and my wife, we eat, breathe, and sleep the Yukon River subsistence dilemma, and we just want fish in the smokehouse. Thank you.
All right. I want to thank the candidates very much for this opportunity to hear them speak, and hopefully there'll be other forums for this. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your participation and for yours out there. Good night.